The sun always shone a little too perfectly on Hawthorne Grove. Every lawn was shaved to exactly 2 inches. Every mailbox painted the approved shade of heritage beige, and every flag, only American, only on approved holidays, fluttered like it had signed a contract. It was the kind of suburb where people smiled at the HOA meetings and then went home to seethe in private. I was Madison Reed, 31, graphic designer, working from the spare bedroom I could barely afford after the last round of compliance fees. My crime? Leaving my trash bin out 20 minutes past the sacred 8 a.m. Pickup window. Karen Whitaker, our beloved HOA president, had personally photographed it, circled it in red on the monthly newsletter, and fined me $250. Again, she always spoke in that syrupy voice at the quarterly meetings, pearls gleaming, clipboard in hand. We're just protecting property values. Dear, it's for everyone's benefit. Everyone nodded like good little sheep. I used to nod too, until the fines started stacking like snowdrifts. $175 for my holiday lights staying up 3 days too long. $400 for parking my work van in the driveway instead of the garage. $800 for unauthorized plantings when my hydrangeas dared to bloom purple instead of the approved white. The newsletter called me a repeated disruptor. Neighbors stopped waving. My own mother, yes, my actual mother, who sat on the board as treasurer, texted me weekly, "Just pay it. Maddie, you're making us look bad." That February afternoon, the sky turned the color of old steel and the wind sliced straight through every coat. I was rushing to the community mailbox, gloves cheap and unraveling, fingers numb, when I saw him. An older man, silver beard, thin navy windbreaker, sitting on the wooden bench in the common park like he had every right to be there. The bench had a fresh violation sticker, no loitering, HOA Rule 4.2. Karen's work. Obviously, the man didn't shiver. He sat straight-backed, gray eyes sharp as tax forms. I felt the same guilty pang I always did when I saw someone colder than me. My bank account was gasping, but the coffee kiosk at the corner was still open. I bought the largest black, plus the last sesame bagel, and walked over. "It's brutal out here," I said, voice snatched by the wind. "Please, take this." He accepted the cup with steady hands. Not greedy, just deliberate. His fingers brushed mine warm, surprisingly. "Thank you," he said, voice educated. No slur, no tremble. He broke the bagel in half and looked at me like he was reading a balance sheet. "You look like you're running a race nobody else sees." I laughed bitterly. "HOA race. I'm losing." He sipped, eyes never leaving mine. "Your hands are turning blue. Those gloves are failing you." I glanced down. My cheap acrylics were shredded. He set the coffee on the bench, peeled off his own gloves, rich, dark chocolate leather, lined with cashmere, the kind that belonged in a penthouse, not on a park bench in a rule-obsessed suburb. "Here," he said, pressing them into my hands. "Don't argue. I have pockets. You don't." I tried to refuse. He stepped closer. "Some things have value that can't be traded for HOA fines. Put them on. They fit like they've been made for me." The leather warmed instantly. On the inside wrist, stitched in subtle Gothic thread, 2 letters locked together, H and W. Hawthorne. My stomach flipped. I'd seen that exact crest once, at age 10, in my mother's locked drawer. She'd snatched the envelope away. Old trash. Never mention it again. Madison. Why was a man who looked homeless wearing the forbidden symbol of the neighborhood's founding family? My phone buzzed. Another fine alert. I thanked him, turned to leave, and promptly dropped my keys into a snowbank. While I panicked on my knees, he calmly pointed 3 feet away. There, I grabbed them, hands now violently shaking. He simply shoved bare hands into his windbreaker and walked off toward the back gate with the stride of someone who owned the world, not someone banned from a bench. That night in my tiny townhouse, same beige paint, same approved blinds. I peeled the gloves off under the kitchen light and saw the deep scar along the left thumb ridge. Old leather healed over like a battle wound. Then the email arrived. Subject: Hawthorne Grove Trust, Signifier Recovery. Holloway and Brigg, LLP. We are attempting to locate the individual who received a specific pair of leather gloves bearing the H&W monogram. Your name has surfaced in connection with the dormant beneficiary file. I stared at the gloves. The cedar and tobacco scent filled my kitchen like a confession. The email continued. The gloves act as the legal signifier for the primary trust controlling all common areas and reserve funds of Hawthorne Grove. I opened the attachment. The trust had started with millions when the neighborhood was built in 1982. Current balance: $3,412.18. Withdrawals over 20 years told the story. Administrative consulting to Whitaker Consulting, Karen's husband's firm. Lifestyle maintenance adjustments to M. Reed, my own mother. Event sponsorship supplements to B. Whitaker, Karen's daughter. Every dime of resident fees funneled into the board's pockets while they fined the rest of us into obedience. My mother had called it protecting the community. She called me ungrateful for questioning the $800 fine last month. My phone lit up. Mom, did you get the lawyer email? Just signed a release. It's scraps. Also, Karen needs you to chair the Spring Fling Committee this weekend. Be there Friday, 5 p.m. No excuses. The coordination was beautiful. They wanted me silent, useful, and broke. I looked at the gloves. The scars seemed to pulse. The old man's voice echoed. Don't let your hands get ruined by people who aren't worth it. I typed 2 letters. No scent. Then I replied to the lawyers. I have the gloves. When can we meet? The war had started with a cup of coffee and a pair of warm hands. And I was done shivering for the Hawthorne Grove HOA. The next morning, I woke to 3 new violation notices taped to my door. Unauthorized gloves visible from street. Rule 7.1. Only approved outerwear colors. Karen's handwriting. I laughed out loud for the first time in months. I wore the leather gloves to the community center anyway. The soft creak like armor. Inside, the board meeting was already in session. Karen stood at the podium, pearls gleaming, voice dripping honey. We simply cannot allow residents to undermine property values with eccentric accessories. She stared straight at me. The room tittered. My mother sat beside her, nodding like a puppet. I raised my hand. Question. The reserve fund balance in the last newsletter was listed as healthy. Yet my trust letter says it's down to $3,000. Care to explain? Silence thicker than the approved beige carpet. Karen's smile tightened. That's an old family trust. Dear, nothing to do with our HOA fees. You're confused. My mother's eyes begged me to shut up. I didn't. Funny. The lawyers say the gloves I'm wearing right now are the legal key to the entire controlling interest. So maybe it does concern all of us. Gasps. Karen's face went the color of a violation sticker. Security, escort the disruptor out. 2 board rent-a-cops moved toward me. I simply held up the gloves. Monogram catching the light. Before you touch me, you might want to Google Holloway and Brigg. They're already filing for an audit. The cops hesitated. Karen recovered fast. This is exactly the kind of hysteria we warned about. Madison has been a problem for years. We may need to discuss leaning her property. The threat hung in the air like cheap air freshener. I left before they could vote. Outside, snow still falling. I drove to the storage address the lawyers had quietly texted. Whitlock, no. Hawthorne Private Holdings. The gate required biometric plus the physical tag I'd found sewn into the glove lining the night before. A small brass plate reading Hawthorne Unit 19. The guard scanned my palm after I presented the gloves. MS. Read. Mr. Hawthorne has been waiting 30 years for this moment. Inside the vault, rows of ledgers. The original 1982 charter. The True Reserve Fund statements showing Karen and my mother had siphoned over $2 million in consulting and event fees while telling residents the pool needed a special assessment. My phone exploded. Karen, you are finished. I've spoken to your clients. Expect cancellations. Mom, you ungrateful child. After everything we've done, I screenshotted every threat, started a folder labeled documentation. Then I called the one client who mattered, the community spring fling organizer slot Karen had forced on me. Actually, I told the board's secretary, I'm making a few changes to the event. VIP guests, press, and security. They couldn't say no without looking tyrannical. That night, I sat in my townhouse wearing the gloves, scrolling the forged signatures on every withdrawal. My mother's handwriting on checks made out to Karen's daughter for college support. The year I was told I couldn't afford braces. They'd taken a lifestyle adjustment of $12,000 for Karen's kitchen remodel. The contrast made me laugh, dark, hollow, satisfying. A stranger in the snow had given me the only thing of value he owned. My own mother and her HOA coven had spent decades stealing from every homeowner they claimed to protect. I opened my laptop and drafted the counter letter to the lawyers. I'm ready to claim the trust, and I want the full forensic audit released to every resident. The reply came at 2 a.m. Verification meeting tomorrow 10 a.m. Bring the gloves. Do not discuss with third parties, especially board members. I slept with the gloves on my nightstand, the cedar scent wrapping around me like a promise. Tomorrow I would walk into the lion's den wearing the skin of the lion they thought they'd buried. And this time, the HOA Karen who had spent years fining me into submission was about to learn what happened when the quiet resident finally bit back. The law firm lobby smelled of mahogany and old money. Dana Kessler, senior partner, didn't waste time. The gloves are the crown. Madison. Hawthorne's bylaws state the controlling interest in the entire HOA corporation, including the power to dissolve the board, returns only when the true heir presents them voluntarily. She slid the forensic report across the desk. $2 million drained. Signatures forged in my mother's hand. Karen's husband's firm taking 15% admin fees every year. Your mother and Karen Whitaker have been running a private piggy bank disguised as an HOA, Dana said. Felony territory. I signed the demand for independent audit and asset freeze. What about the spring fling I'm forced to host? Dana smiled like a shark. Use it. Make it public. Invite reporters. The board can't stop you without admitting they're terrified. I left with the gloves on, feeling the scar under my thumb like a heartbeat. Back in Hawthorne Grove, the newsletter had a new headline. Resident Madison Reed under investigation for spreading malicious rumors. My driveway now had orange cones and a $1,200 fine notice for unauthorized vehicle storage. Karen was escalating. I hired ironclad security anyway. Marcus, the lead guard, took photos of Karen, my mother, and every board member. These people are liabilities. Remove quietly if they show up Friday. He nodded like he'd heard it all before. Family. Worse, I said. Neighbors who think they own me. Thursday night, the gloves felt heavier. I practiced the speech I'd never give until I realized I would. The old man, Elias, had waited 30 years on that bench for someone kind enough not to sell the gloves for rent money. I wasn't going to sell out either. At 6 a.m., Friday, my mother showed up unannounced. Pastel cardigan. Fake tears ready. Maddie, honey, this has gone too far. Karen is devastated. Just sign the release and share the event like a good girl. We'll even waive the fines. I held up the gloves. These say otherwise. And I'm not sharing anything. I'm hosting. You're not invited. She gasped like I'd slapped her. After everything we sacrificed, you sacrificed my future for Karen's granite countertops. The bank is closed. Mom. She left screaming into her phone. By noon, the threats were flying. Karen texting that my clients were being contacted. My mother promising to expose my instability at the event. I simply forwarded everything to Dana and Marcus. The spring fling tent went up on the common green, white lights. Champagne. A podium I'd rented myself. Residents arrived curious. Reporters arrived because I'd leaked the audit summary anonymously. Karen arrived in full pearls and clipboard armor, flanked by my mother and her daughter Blair. They marched straight to the podium like they owned it. Karen snatched the mic. There seems to be a misunderstanding. This event is canceled due to safety concerns. That's when Marcus and 2 guards stepped forward. Mom, you're not on a guest list. Please leave. Karen's face purpled. Do you know who I am? Yes, Marcus said flatly. The woman who just got served with a federal asset freeze. My mother tried to fake faint, collapsing dramatically on the grass. Clutching her chest, Blair started live streaming. My mother is having a heart attack, and this monster is letting her die. Phones rose everywhere. I walked calmly to the spare mic. Feedback whining through the speakers. The crowd hushed. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, voice steady, gloves on full display. The 2 women on the grass are Karen Whitaker and my mother, Mary Ann Reed, former treasurer. They are not guests. They are here in violation of the very rules they wrote. And contrary to the show, my mother is not dying. She's having a tantrum because I refuse to keep paying for their stolen HOA millions. Gasps turned to murmurs. Karen sat up, forgetting her performance. You liar. I held up my phone. I have the text demanding I babysit your events. The forged signatures. The $2 million audit. Security. Please remove these trespassers. The crowd didn't riot. They applauded. Mrs. Hargrove, the richest resident, stood. I always thought those fees were high. Get them out. Marcus escorted Karen and my mother toward the gate while Blair screamed about abuse into her phone. Karen's last words before the police cruiser arrived. You'll never win. This is my neighborhood. I leaned into the mic one last time. Actually, the bylaws say it's mine now. Enjoy the audit. Karen. The applause turned into a roar. Residents who'd feared her for years suddenly looked free. I stood on the podium in the glowing lights, gloves warm against my skin, and for the first time, the ridiculous rules of Hawthorne Grove felt like they belonged to someone else. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and desperation. Karen sat at the defense table in the same pastel cardigan my mother had worn, dabbing dry eyes. My mother beside her, playing the frail victim. Blair live-streamed from a gallery until the judge threatened contempt. I sat beside Dana, gloves in an evidence bag on the table, monogram catching the light like a taunt. Karen's slick lawyer opened. This is elder abuse and extortion. My client merely enforced reasonable rules. MS. Reed stole a family heirloom and fabricated a wild conspiracy. They played the edited video of the spring fling, my mother collapsing, me coldly calling security. The courtroom murmured in disapproval. Then Dana stood. She didn't do drama. She dropped a stack of ledgers that thudded like a gavel. Your Honor, we prefer math. She projected the forensic report. Every withdrawal, every forged signature, every dollar funneled to Karen's husband's firm. My mother's consulting, Blair's fake college fund. This is not mismanagement, Dana said. This is systematic embezzlement of resident funds totaling over $2 million. Karen's lawyer objected. Overruled. My mother tried to interrupt. Voice cracking. Those gloves are mine. My first husband gave them to me. Dana smiled. So you admit knowing their value as the Hawthorne signifier, which means you knew about the trust and chose to hide it while draining it. Karen's face drained of color. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Whitaker, you just admitted under oath that you recognize the item central to a $2 million fraud case. That was when the heavy doors opened. Elias Hawthorne walked in, silver beard trimmed, charcoal suit, the same steady stride from the park bench. Every head turned. The judge recognized him instantly. Mr. Hawthorne. Elias didn't need permission. He took the stand. I am the founder of Hawthorne Grove. I faked my disappearance 30 years ago after my own board, led by these two, tried to force me out. I waited on that bench for the one person who would choose kindness over greed. They looked straight at me. Madison gave me coffee when she had nothing. She kept the gloves because she worried an old man would be cold. She passed the test. He presented the DNA results confirming I was his granddaughter through his late son, the father my mother had erased from my birth certificate. The courtroom exploded. Karen tried to feign again. This time no one bought it. Elias continued, voice like winter wind. The gloves are not just leather. They are the legal key to the corporation. Madison voluntarily returned them yesterday. The empire is hers. And these two have been robbing every homeowner here for decades. The judge didn't hesitate. Bailiff. Detain Mrs. Whitaker and Mrs. Reed pending fraud charges. Significant flight risk. Handcuffs clicked. My mother looked at me. Real tears now. Maddie, please. I'm your mother. I stood at the railing. You told me never to dig up the past. I'm grateful I finally did. You hated me because I was the one thing you could never control, the real heir. They dragged her out screaming my name. Blair tried one last pivot in the gallery. Addie, think of the family. I smiled. I am. Their college funds will go straight to the schools. You'll never touch them. Elias waited outside. He handed me the gloves, scar and all. You kept them safe. Now we use them to fix what they broke. I slid them on. The cedar scent felt like coming home. Reporters swarmed. I didn't flinch. For 31 years, I'd been the quiet resident, the rule follower, the one who paid the fines. Now Hawthorne Grove was mine to rewrite. And the woman who had spent years enforcing 2-inch lawns and beige mailboxes was headed to a cell wearing an orange jumpsuit that definitely violated the color code. The morning after the verdict, the neighborhood woke up different. Orange cones disappeared from my driveway. The newsletter arrived with a single line. HOA President Karen Whitaker has stepped down pending legal matters. All fines are suspended until further notice. Residents actually waved. Some left flowers on my porch with notes. Thank you for fighting for us. Elias moved back into the original Hawthorne estate at the end of the cul-de-sac, the one Karen had tried to seize as community property. I stood on the wide porch with him, gloves still on, watching the sun rise over lawns that no longer had to be exactly 2 inches. You could have told me who you were that day in the snow, I said. He smiled, the same knowing smile from the bench. If I had, you might have seen the money first. I needed to know who you were when you had nothing. A Hawthorne isn't defined by the bank account. They're defined by what they do when the account is empty. I thought my mother's texts, Karen's clipboard, the years of small humiliations. I was cold for a long time, I admitted. Not just the weather. Elias placed his hand over mine. You warmed yourself, and in doing so you warmed the whole neighborhood. Dana arrived with the final papers. The corporation was mine. The reserve fund would be repaid to every homeowner. The ridiculous rules were being rewritten by resident vote. No more fining people for the wrong hydrangea color. No more approved outerwear. Just common sense. That afternoon, I hosted the first real block party. No clipboard. No violations. Residents brought their own flags, their own lights, their own laughter. Marcus stood at the gate just in case. But the only drama was Blair showing up once. Eyes desperate. Maddie, the twins need. I cut her off gently. Their tuition is paid directly. You're welcome to visit them at school. But the handouts are over. She left crying real tears this time. The cord was cut. As the sun set, Elias and I stood on the community green. I handed him the gloves one last time. They kept me warm when nothing else did. He shook his head. Keep them. They always fit you better. I slid them back on. The scar under my thumb felt like a badge now, not a wound. Somewhere in the distance, I heard Karen's voice in my memory. We're just protecting property values. Dear, I smiled into the glowing twilight. The value was never in the lawns. It was in the people brave enough to stand up when the rules became chains. The old man who once sat on a forbidden bench had waited 30 years. I had waited 31. Together we'd ended the reign of the woman who thought she could find kindness out of existence. Hawthorne Grove wasn't perfect anymore. It was free. And for the first time, so was I. Thank you for listening to Madison's story. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And have you ever fought your own HOA Karen? If this revenge drama made you cheer, smash that like button, subscribe, and share with every neighbor who's ever been fined for breathing wrong. Justice feels good, doesn't it?